Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Just wondering if you could let us know if you can hear us and let us know where you're from. Where you viewing this from? Oh, sorry. Sorry, some technical issues already. Got a issue on LinkedIn, but I think that's sorted now. So, hi everyone.
Maybe you could bring your sound up a bit, Babish.
Yes, I'll do that. So, I'm here with Denis Rothman.
So I can see people from Brussels, from Iran.
Excellent. Anyone want to just put a message in if they can hear us okay? Oh. Hopefully someone will message soon. So I'll introduce you, Dennis. So obviously you're an expert in machine learning, AI, explainable AI, large language models, generative AI, and also a best-selling author, including your new book, which you've got here. So that's good. Oh, so Jane said she can hear us. So excellent. Just want to see if people from LinkedIn can hear us okay. Wait for some comments. So I think while we wait for someone to just LinkedIn to just message us if they can hear us, should we start with the first question, Dennis?
Okay.
So for someone new to LLMs, where do they begin?
So it's a real problem because today there are so many models on the market and platforms, books, articles, and everyone is producing AI on all sorts of platforms. So for the person that begins, I would say 3 directions. The first direction would be to try to use these large language models. That means going to Google Gemini, where you can ask questions, go to OpenAI ChatGPT, go to Bing where you have GPT-4, but it's not the same version as OpenAI. So now you have 3 AIs that you can look at. So that's the first direction, okay? But the problem now is, what are you going to ask? What are you going to ask these AIs to evaluate them and to see if you like them and you're going to do something and how they work? So if you start with easy questions like cooking and recipes and things like that, I don't think you'll go anywhere. Let's be frank about that. You always have these questions, what am I going to cook for dinner next week? You don't need artificial intelligence to do that. You don't need to use all that power just to say, I want to cook a meal on Monday. So what you have to do is find something you know about. Like suppose you're an expert in a field or you know something about a field. You want to first test the system to see how far it can go and what you like. Suppose you're an engineer. Suppose you're an engineer in electronics. Well, then you want to ask questions about electronics. You're not trying to learn something. You're trying to figure out how it works. And then little by little, you'll understand how one of these chat systems works. Like you start with Google Gemini. And then when you go to Bing, you'll find that the behavior is totally different. So you look at Bing and you say, wow, it's not saying that it's not working at all like Gemini. Why? Because Bing is very different. It will first do a search, a classical search, and it will look for websites, and then it will sum up these websites, which means it's an augmented search engine. But do the same thing. Take something you know about. If you're a psychologist, anything you know about, and see how it reacts to what you know, and see how far it can take you. And then you go to ChatGPT, which of course is one of the most powerful ones on the market. But then where you start there, because you have a free version Then you have a paid version, which is ChatGPT Plus, which has a lot more functions. So you might be disappointed by the free version. So this might take you a few days. Don't think this is an easy task, because then you have three parts of that. If you don't know much about a subject, you'll go nowhere, because how do you know if it's saying nonsense or not? You don't. So if you don't know anything about a subject, you can't trust it. You don't trust it. You don't trust anybody. Okay, you don't trust anybody or anything. So that's why you have to start with something that's intermediate, something you know about, and see how far it can take you. Then you need to reach the level where you can say, "Wow, that's the limit. It's not creative enough for me. It doesn't have enough expertise." Let's see, like in a legal field, you might see some nice laws and everything, but then when you ask them about something specific, one of these systems, it doesn't know how to answer. So then you found an upper limit. So there's the lower limit where you have to start above with something you know, and then there's the upper limit where you reach the limit. But until you understand those two limits, well, you're not going to go very far. So first, you need to play around with these three main models: Google, Gemini, Microsoft Bing with GPT-4 activated, and ChatGPT. Of course, there are other ones. If you want to have fun, you can go on Hugging Face, or you can go on places like that where very entertaining. But you won't reach the level you're reaching with the most powerful ones. So you need to go see. Then you can go check other. So now that's just one direction. Remember I said there are three directions? Now you need to take a second direction, is to understand how they work. How does a generative AI algorithm work? And you're going to begin, and now you're going to have a problem. So remember the first direction is to test. Now you're reaching to understand the model, but it's nearly impossible to accept it. So let me tell you why. It's nearly impossible to accept how a generative AI works, because it's purely mathematical and statistical. It knows nothing. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It's just statistical. It's saying, like, let's say it's like a logical test. You see A, B, C, what comes after D? But the problem, why do I say it seems very simple to understand what I just said? But why am I saying it's impossible to accept it? Because for as long as language exists, the only people using language have been humans. So we always end up thinking that this AI is a person, no matter what we do. Even me, I know the mathematics of it. I built them. I know everything. But when you talk to it, you think it's somebody. So there's a huge problem here, because there's no consciousness. It's just a pack of mathematics with statistics. But then we humans can't accept that. We can't say, you're not going to tell me that this thing has nothing in it, and it does things better than me. And it's telling me that it has to think something. It's biased. It's trying to influence me. But it's not it. It's just a thing. So that's a huge stumbling block to go over. And the only way to go over is to go, for example, in chapters 1 and 2 in my book, and so chapter 1, I'll begin to take you there. And chapter 2 is a tough chapter full of simple math, but it's so difficult to accept that there's nothing in it. It's just a bunch of statistics. You're going to say, I'm looking in something that's nearly empty. How can it do so much? So you need to understand that. And suppose you have some problems with some paragraphs in that chapter 2, you can always copy and paste them into one of the three AIs I've been talking about and ask for an explanation. So that second direction means you have to understand how it works, and you have to find a method where you can immediately think, no, this is not a person, this is just math. You have to find a way. Otherwise, you'll get trapped and addicted, and you'll think you have a companion, think you're going to have a friend. You might even fall in love with the thing. There's been cases like that where in Japan, someone got married with an AI. So don't get trapped. There's only math in there. So now direction 1, you were playing around with it. Direction 2, you understood it. Now direction 3, well, you're going to have to make a decision. Now you have to get your hands dirty. You have to go into the GitHub repository of the book, and you have to begin to click on these programs and see how they work to make a choice. Because now that you know how they work a bit, you know what's in it. Now you have to see what's best for your need, and you have to test all kinds of models. Hugging Face is full of excellent models to test. Okay, then you have Google that you have with Google Palm 2, and you have Google Gemini, then you have ChatGPT, but ChatGPT, there are about 50 versions and variations of their model. So now you need to get your hands dirty. You have to run them. You have to it can summarize well, but doesn't answer questions the way I want. Maybe I'll go back and use this model, or maybe that's an expensive model because now you have cost. Now that you're playing around and you're getting your hands dirty, what's free and what do I have to pay for? Now, if I have to pay for ChatGPT and I have to pay for Vertex AI and I have to pay for some of the use of Hugging Face, by the time I make a decision, I'm going to be spending a lot of money. So you're going to have to take cost into account and maybe go back to what I was saying, taking a subject that you know something about and test it. See if it goes that way. What do you want to do? Summarize, answer questions. So now you have to get your hands dirty and you have to test all these notebooks to see what you want and what you need. Then at this point, you have your 3 directions. You've played around with it. You know how the model works, and you've tested a lot of systems like from Hugging Face, OpenAI, Google. You've tested a lot of things, or maybe free versions of Google T5 or all kinds of models, GPT-4, GPT-3, T5, BERT, Roberta. The book is full of models. And now that you know all this, well, you're ready to go and you're ready to talk to a customer, or you're ready to talk to yourself to see what you want to do.
Cool. So just thought I'd mention before we move on to the next question, feel free to post questions in the chat and we'll sort of get to answering them. And also, we are doing a giveaway of 2 e-copies as well. So if you put a hashtag Packt in the comments, you basically perform two raffles, and 2 lucky winners will get an e-copy of the book. So while we wait for viewers to post questions, so we have such a wide range of models. How do you choose like the most suitable model for your task?
So now that's a huge problem too, because if you look at so a lot of people will go look at the performances. So if you go to a leaderboard, you can say, oh, well, this is the best model. It says so. I read it in a paper that ChatGPT passed the New York bar exam. So it has to be a good model. I mean, I saw it. It's written there in that paper, so it can be a lawyer because it passed the bar exam with some excellent grades. So then you think, well, then I don't have to think anymore. All I have to do is implement it in my legal department, and here we go. But then if you open the New York Times and you go back and you look for some history of what happened, you will see that there's a lawyer who believed that. And he asked a question to ChatGPT before going to court. And ChatGPT hallucinated. It invented, I don't know how many legal cases. The guy printed it out. He went to court. And the judge says, well, that's fine. You know what? I'm suing you because nothing of what you said exists. You're just inventing stuff. You're a very bad lawyer. I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to sue you. You're going to be disbarred. So what am I saying here? I'm going back to critical thinking, right? So remember in the first part of this conversation, I said, That's right. I see a LinkedIn using LLM passing an exam means something about the exam itself than about the capacity to do the job. So I couldn't say that in better words. I mean, this LinkedIn user is fine. It doesn't say anything about the capacity to do the job. Now, where does that leave us? That means that all these benchmarks we're looking at are not going to help us at all. We need yeah, there's another one too from Ronald. He says, a fool with a tool is still a fool. That's great. Remember that I said you have to have a level of knowledge before using it, because we're all a fool in some area. I'm a fool in many areas. If you take me out of AI, I'm a fool in half of most of everything that exists. So I'm a fool in many areas, but I won't go and use an AI to do something I don't know about. So a fool with a tool is still a fool is a good rule. That means that you have to start at a certain level of manual knowledge, something you know about. You have a degree or something, and then you can analyze and you can make the best of that tool. So now, going back to this model choice, we can't trust the leaderboards. We also know that a fool with a tool is still a fool, because that means we have to know something about the topic or the domain before we go there. And then we saw that passing an exam, another LinkedIn user says passing an exam doesn't say anything about your capacity to do the job. So now what I suggest is to build a data set. Okay, what you need to do is to build a data set, because a fool with a data set is not a fool anymore. Because now if you have a data set and you know what you expect, and you're not telling the system what you expect, then you can go and you can test the systems. Like in chapter 15, I wrote a big benchmark where I asked the system about 100 and more than 100 tasks to do. And I was watching the answers. Some answers are insane, some are good. So what you need to do is build a data set. And from that data set, then you can test the models. Now that seems easy, but it isn't, because how are you going to build that data set? Okay, because you have to be an expert. So it might cost a lot of money to and time to build that data set. But unfortunately, you're going to have to do something like that. You need a data set, even if it's a data set on a piece of paper, and you just type prompts into ChatGPT or Gemini or Bing. You need a data set, and then you need to compare. You need to compare one answer to another until you find something that's satisfactory. Now, some people use metrics. They're going to say, wow, I built a data set with 1,000 things and I got 1,000 good answers. Well, it's still not enough. Now that you're going to have to introduce some of your users, you're going to need other people to test it with you, because you may find that the way you ask questions is not the way someone else is going to ask questions. So now you're beginning to enter the world of real life integration and model choices. Like I see someone saying, can you integrate knowledge and transformers? Could there be a close relationship between knowledge graphs and RAG? Okay. Now, RAG, so you can use RAG to improve, to test. We're in choosing a model. So if you want to use RAG, you can do that. For example, let's take an example. If you go to ChatGPT Plus, I'm sorry, because it's a paid version, but at one point you're going to have to put $20 into the system to see for 1 month. You put $20 in there for 1 month to see what's going on. You can now that question there by a LinkedIn user can be interesting, because I can go to ChatGPT Plus and I can say, I want to evaluate this system. I want to see if I like this model. Why don't I create my own GPT? What I can say today is that on OpenAI, you can create your own GPT with your own documents and your own data. Before they had plugins, but now they have abandoned the plugins. Be careful of that. They keep changing. All these platforms keep changing their minds and changing everything. So, and in any case, today you can go to ChatGPT Plus and you can upload a PDF. And you can upload a PDF of all your marketing prices or whatever you want, and then you can immediately ask it questions. There's no waiting time. It will integrate it immediately. It will take what you know and it'll feed it into the model, and the model will answer. And then you can test to see how much this works. It's one way of choosing a model. Then you can try to do it with prompts on Hugging Face, where you just copy pieces of text and augment your input. You can try with any system you want. What I've noticed, because I use these things day out and day out, day in and day out, and night in and night out, as Babish knows, I'm a 24/7 AI crazy geek. So I notice that sometimes it just forgets things. When you do that with that RAG system, you put them in your own ChatGPT, okay, which we did with Babish on our GitHub repository. We have a chat, we created a GPT on the GitHub repository. You can click on it and you can use it if you have ChatGPT Plus. But I've noticed that it answers some questions very well, but then it forgot other things I did. So now, if I want to choose it, am I going to say that's a bad model? Maybe now I have to fine tune it to see, but fine tuning is a cost. So now I have to take a large amount of data, fine tune it, and make a choice. So now you can see that there is a process. Can I use the model as it is? Can I use the model if I make better prompts? Can I use the model if I fine tune it? Can I use the model if I introduce RAG? So now what seems some kind of magical dream is becoming a nightmare, because now we're realizing that it's magic as long as I don't want to do something in real life with it. Then all of a sudden it hits me. I have to work a lot. So that means I'll have to build a data set, test the prompts, fine tune, add documents, what we say is retrieval augmented generation, or just augmented generation on GPT, where you just add things. Now that I did that with GPT, I'm going to have to go do that with Hugging Face. Hugging Face has thousands of models, thousands and thousands and thousands of models. Which one am I going to choose? Google is a jungle of models too. So it's like going to a shop. Now you have to think, if I go to a shop and I want to buy a pair of shoes, am I going to try all the shoes in the shop? I'm going to go crazy. I'm not going to test all the shoes in the shop. I'm going to take the first pair of shoes I like and it's not too expensive and get out of that shop as fast as possible. So I might try, if I were you, I might try and say, why don't I go to Hugging Face? Because I want to be smart about this and try Llama 2. Okay. Llama 2 is a very big, it's an LLM that comes from ex-Facebook called Meta. They didn't do a lot of work. They just copied the original architecture of the 2017 article by Google. It's even written in their paper in paragraph 2. You can read it. They said, we just took the basic model and we just piled a lot of data into it. But Meta, ex-Facebook, has so much data that's not that bad. So maybe you can try that free version. And there are a lot of interfaces there where people create interfaces where you can test it online. So you might want to test a free version, and you might want to test the pay version. So now we're going to test OpenAI, we're going to test Google. I've run all of these. I can honestly say that there's no big difference between Google Vertex Gemini and GPT-4V, which is the last model with images. There's not a big difference, because the more we advance in time, the more it's going to look like a car dealership, where the person says, my car is the best. So what are you going to buy? A Mercedes, a Porsche, or a Ford? But at one time, when you reach a certain price level, all these cars look like, if you watch TV, all these ads look the same. You're wondering, Oh, isn't that the car I just saw? No, that's another ad. So little by little, with competition, they're all beginning to look the same and do the same thing. Okay, because there are a lot of users doing the same thing. So you should maybe try a free version like Llama. So that means you try the prompt, you try to fine tune it, you try RAG on it, and then you see what happens. Then you try a paid one, either Google Vertex AI with Palm 2 or Gemini and all their variations. Google has a pile of them too. And then you go to OpenAI, and then you can try and see. And then when you reach your budget, they all have budgets where you can say, I'm not going over $10, I'm not going over $20. Well, then you might get somewhere. And then when you're all ready, you go see your customer, and your customer says, I don't like it. That's what happens like 9 times out of 10. And then you have to convince your customer that he's dreaming. And then you have to take what I've been saying for 30 minutes and explain it to him. You have to take your customer by the hand and explain that he's not in a sci-fi movie, that he's in reality. And if he continues his sci-fi, well, you're going to leave, and then he'll have nothing, or maybe he wants something that will improve his company, but he's going to have to calm down a bit. So it's going to be tough to choose it, and it's going to be tough to explain everything we just said to your customer, but the customer, she or he, has to understand. He, she, they, whatever you want, but that customer has to understand that it's not magic. So because DeepMind skill, maybe Gemini is a better choice. I see is DeepMind or Gemini a better choice. As of chapter 1 of that book, I give nobody a choice. I say Hugging Face. Suppose you took your DeepMind thing and you think Gemini is fine, but you go to a corporation and say, we don't work with DeepMind. I'm sorry, we only work with Hugging Face, because we download the models. We don't want to pay. We have private data. We don't want to go on platforms. So it's forbidden. You cannot use an API by Google or OpenAI in my company. Okay, so then you go to Hugging Face. Now you go to a corporation. Corporate say, what are you talking about? We have an agreement with Amazon and we have a thing, and we only work with OpenAI. So if you're only working with Hugging Face, we're not hiring you. So you cannot make a choice beforehand. You have to understand how all of these models work and give your customer the choice, because in the end, he who feeds you governs the world. I mean, the customer has the money.
Just thinking, should we do the first draw for the ebook? I'll just get that. So let's do the draw here. And Sudhavane, you've won the first ebook. If you can just drop me a message on LinkedIn with your full name and email address, and we'll get that book to you as soon as possible.
So there are 2 little questions we can answer before we move to part 3. There's someone saying, can we reduce the size of a model?
Yes.
Now, that's exactly what I was saying beforehand. There is no absolute magic bullet. For example, of course, we now have quantization, which means that we can use integers instead of real numbers for part of the calculation. So we can leverage, like Google has been creating computers like that with chips, GPU chips that can calculate integers and save a lot of space. So maybe it might work, if you go to a company and you say, you know what, we delivered, there's a Ferrari out there, or you can go at 300 miles an hour, but I can take a lot of stuff out of the engine there, and you bring it down to a Ford family car, but only go 50 miles an hour. Now, if your customer is willing to go 50 miles an hour, he might say, sure, that's an excellent idea. We're going to save a lot of money and servers. If you're talking about people that are in the weather business with weather predictions, where the data is going by the billions and the billions and the billions, well, then you're going to need a pretty big model, and you're not going to get anywhere with a smaller model. So once again, that's a choice. I can go to work with a bicycle. If I live in Manhattan, I can go to work with a bicycle if I only have a few blocks to go. Now, if I'm going through LinkedIn Tunnel, I'm not going to go through with a bicycle. I'll get killed by the pollution. I'm going to go with a car. So there is no real magic bullet, but of course, it's worth it to try a small model like in chapters 5 and 6 of our book. I'm using small BERT and Roberta models, and they don't do that bad. And maybe someone might even be happy with one of these models, and it might work for some of a simple case, and it might be great. There's only 80 million parameters in the one I used in chapter 5. In chapter 7, I used one with 175 billion parameters. So of course, what I'm saying is you need to understand the different models, how big and small they are, and choose the right one. So of course, it could be practical for everyday use, but for whom? Like if you're working in a hospital with cancer prediction, you're going to want a big model, and you don't want to make any mistakes. If it's just to say how many Kleenexes do I need in the rooms in that hospital, and I'll make some predictions, of course, I can use a smaller model. Which leads us to the next question, which is frequency trading predictions. Okay, now that is a topic which has been, I'm not an expert at all in trading because I don't trade. My only interest in money is to buy, I live in France, to buy some nice croissants for breakfast, or go to the restaurant with friends, or I'm not interested in trading. Is really a job. Now there's an excellent book, Babish, if you can find it, on trading in Packt, trading algorithms.
Yes.
I read that book from A to Z, and I really liked it. So I don't think, what you have to understand is we're a bit late on the topic in this conversation, because the New York Stock Exchange is already using AI, exactly like you're saying, news, consumption, websites, and it's already using AI to make predictions, and it's already using for trading, and they sell and they buy stock already. If you go and look at it, I was in a conference one day, I think with MIT somewhere, and someone presented that it already exists. Transformers, of course, can help. But they have to be added to machine learning algorithms and to classical. To do trading, you need everything. You need classical queries. You need the automatic stop functions. You need machine learning. You need transformers. Anything you can get, because trading is a very complex job. That will work for a certain number of transactions. When it comes to the big ones, even today, because although I'm not an expert, I talk to experts in this field, it's human. Because if I'm talking about, if you give me, let's say, $5 billion, I'm not going to let an algorithm make the decision for me. I'm going to have to explore that. And don't think that $5 billion is something rare. Banks do these kind of transactions day in and day out with billions of dollars. So this is so I would say yes. AI is already used on the New York Stock Exchange and probably on other stock exchanges. And then you need to dig into this with a good book, and then go look on the internet for experts, and go talk to real people doing the real thing.
Yeah, I've just posted a link to machine learning for algorithmic trading if anyone's interested.
So then you have your third topic.
So yeah, we'll just move on to Revanth's question. So
I'm now studying third year engineering, interested in learning about AI. Studied with SQL. Please say, what are the topics? That's an excellent question. That's a question I've avoided since the beginning of this conversation. I have cautiously avoided that topic. Because I spent years studying linguistics at Sorbonne University. I mean, I spent years and years studying how languages are built, how patterns in languages. There's a chapter in the chapter 12 of the book where there's syntax-free SRL. It's really, linguistics is a specialization. So when you're talking about natural language processing, the first thing you have to understand is how do you process a language manually? I mean, it's like saying, you know what, I'm going to look at a robot. I'm going to look at a robot repair a car, but I'm not a mechanic. I don't know what it's doing. I'm just watching, and it's great. It opens the hood and it goes in. It repairs. I don't know what it's doing. But I'm an expert in mechanics. You can't say that. You go to a company and the company says, what can you tell me about NLP? Well, I can tell you everything's automatic. Let me give you an example. You have a car, the robot opens it and repairs it automatically. But what do you know about mechanics? I don't know anything. Oh, you don't? No. I just trust the system. So I avoided this topic because it's one of the keys of becoming an expert in that field is studying computational linguistics. And going from the basis, what's a noun, what's an adjective, what's a verb, what does that mean? What is a noun, a verb? What is a noun and a verb? I mean, how does that work? What is a noun and a verb? So you say, yeah, but if I take SRL, in your chapter 12, semantic role labeling, well, you don't need to know syntax. And even Bavish and I had some exchanges on that chapter. I said, doesn't know anything, but I'll give you an analysis. But how can you confirm that analysis if you don't know anything about linguistics? It's spitting out that's a noun, that's an adverb, an adjective, although it didn't learn it. So then you're saying, well, it's a noun and a verb. So you say, well, Dennis, I don't need to study at Sorbonne University to know what a noun and a verb is. The thing is, semantic role labeling doesn't work if there's no verb. Now, the problem is that we have about 2 billion people in Asia that are using agglutinative languages where the verb doesn't mean much. I mean, they will say house, go, come, house, go, we go, house. There's in Chinese or Japanese and Vietnamese and agglutinative language, there's no verb. So then now it's becoming that's becoming a big problem because you look at ChatGPT. I did it today. It says, well, don't ask me that in English, in French, because I don't really understand that in French. I'll translate it. But then you look at the translation and say, what am I looking at? So then you have someone that comes, there's someone here I saw that is following us from Iran. Someone's following us here. There's someone here from Iran looking at this session. In Iran, they're speaking a variant of Persian. Of course, Arabic has been spread out in the Middle East, but people forget that in Iran, these are Persians. We're talking about Persians. We're not talking, they're not Arabs, they're Persian. They come from this great culture centuries ago, this Persians. How does AI work in Persian? I'd be very curious to see if it does anything in Persian. So what? And then you go to Arabic. Arabic is an extremely difficult language to get your head around, and it's certainly not built like English or Hebrew or all these Semitic languages. So what I'm saying here is, Reventh, well, you're going to have to dive into linguistics at least a bit. I mean, and listen to people from different countries, speak to people from Pakistan, people from the United States, from Honduras. I saw someone here from Honduras, and it's Spanish. So Honduras, you're speaking Spanish, but you're not speaking exactly the same Spanish as in Spain or as in Mexico. It's not the same Spanish. Honduras is Honduras. Honduras is not another country. So if you don't understand all these things about linguistics, well, then natural language processing is not only about English. And if you go to India, well, good luck, because there are hundreds of languages. And so you have to understand something about language. And I spent years on that. That's what I have to say about where you have to start. Linguistics and then computational linguist, I mean classical, even before AI. How does this work? So now we have these hallucinations.
Oh, you talk about hallucinations?
That's part
Got
3. How do we mitigate the system?
we've got this question on chatbots. Is that
Oh, yeah, okay.
we can come back to hallucinations if you want. So we've got for chatbots, can we use LLMs to create larger data sets that can be used by more old school approaches?
Yeah, I agree with this user. I've done that. I'm a very lazy person, so I admit that I used LLMs to create larger data sets. And dialogue flow, yeah, I even did a course on that for Packt, and yeah, that's yes, you can do that. In fact, why wouldn't you do that? So, yes, of course. Of course, do that. That's what it's for. It's to be a co-pilot.
So yeah, let's talk about hallucinations and how how do we mitigate all these
Yeah,
LLM
mitigating is the third part here. Okay, so if we take mitigation, now you're in a lot of trouble. That's so. I'm sorry, I come from the real life of AI because mitigation is a nightmare. Because what are we mitigating? So it's hallucinating. The thing is, if we look at all the people from these different countries, and I come from a background where I was raised up in several countries with several cultures, what is bias for one person is the truth for another. So the first problem here is, what are we talking about? If we exclude hallucinations where it's just going to spit out stupidity, and it means when it spits out something that means nothing for everybody, that's great. I mean, that's pure stupidity of the system, and that's pretty easy to correct because you just have to fine tune it, and you have to put some RAG in it, and you can put some classical software filters for obscene words and stuff like that. That's great. But what do you do about the real mitigation we're talking about today on social media when we say that's fake news? Fake news has become what the other person thinks. So the other person says, I think that. The person says, well, that's fake news. Then speak about war between country A and country B. I'm not going to even give names because even in this conversation, the whole chat will explode. So we're going to say we have country A and country B. Country B is going to say something on social media, and that's the truth of that population. I mean, you can say anything you want. That's what they believe. That's what they think. That's who they are. I mean, think what you want. That's what they feel. Then you have the other person that's in A, you have B or A or B, and the other person that A saying, no, I don't agree with B. My truth is that we have to go and fight you. And B says, I'm not going to fight you. Yo, I'm going to. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who has the power in the world? Is there a world leader who can come and say, you are right, you are wrong? There's nobody like that. So mitigation often means, half of this means you don't think like I do, and I don't like the way ChatGPT speaks. Like sometimes people will say, ChatGPT is woke. Or sometimes people will say ChatGPT is racist, or ChatGPT is this, or Gemini is that way, or Bing is that way. It was made by people. These people live in countries, and they are biased by their culture. People living in the West have a tendency to think that the whole world looks like the West. They say, when you go on internet, you're going to have a typical phrase from someone in the West saying, when you go on internet, well, you're going to see. I've done a lot of conferences like this one in Africa. The president says, what do you mean go on internet? I had to walk 20 miles to get to this Zoom meeting. So what am I going on internet? What are you talking about? I don't have internet. I don't have electricity. I had to walk 20 miles to assist to your conference. So please take into account people that don't have electricity or internet. So that'll be a whole different mindset. So mitigation means that you're going to have to I speak about that in chapter 15. you're going to have to take these topics one by one. Like first, political. Okay, you're going to say, how am I going to mitigate political? Political is a very sensitive topic. And honestly, there is no full answer to it. Because if I go to the United States and say things about China, I might be banned by LinkedIn. If I go to China, there's not even LinkedIn. You don't have to worry about LinkedIn. If I go to the United States and I go on TikTok, I can say anything I want. Anything I want. If I go to China, there is no TikTok. They pulled it out and they replaced it by an educative version of TikTok. So where's the truth? So I say, if you're talking about politics and culture, be very careful. I mean, you're not selling ChatGPT. You're probably working for a company, and you're probably working in a country, and you're going to have to take into account the culture of the country. Let me give you an example. I live in France, and in France, their farmers are very mad. They're very, very mad. The farmers are very mad, and they want these AI systems to favor what's made in France, because they work day and night and they don't earn a lot of money. You have a farmer every day that commits suicide every 2 days or every day in France. So you put your system online, and now a Polish farmer uses the system made in France. He said, "What, are you crazy? I want it to say made in Poland. I've been on my tractor since last Sunday, plowing all that wheat there, and you have these Ukrainians sending the wheat over the border. I want wheat made in Poland." But the Ukrainians say, "Hey, what about my wheat?" So you can transform this wheat into any topic, hot topic. So the mitigation is impossible. Okay, you have to admit it. You're not going to mitigate anything. You're just going to please one country and one culture. Then you have the hallucinations, the stupidity I spoke about. You have to train it, fine tune it, put filters. Okay, and then you can also use RAG techniques. You can use, it's full of techniques. Go to chapter 15 and you can use a whole lot of techniques. But you're going to have you're going to have to monitor the system. If you really want to mitigate, I've seen that in defense companies, corporations, where everything that goes through in a corporation is scanned. There's no privacy. It's scanned, and they're looking for keywords like private data getting out of the company, looking for hallucination, stupidity, things that don't mean it. You're going to have a system that monitors the system day and night. And that's what X does. That's what Meta does. That's what you have on Instagram. They have systems monitoring everything that's going on day in and day out. The problem is there's so many billions of things, they can't find everything. And once they find it, they have to make a physical decision. There's a human. So you're going to have to monitor it. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to control the prompts, see if they're good. You're going to have to mitigate it with moderation AIs. You have moderation AIs on OpenAI, which will check the language and everything. But then, of course, you'll quickly reach the limit of culture. Like take Disney. I worked for Disneyland, and they say, Dennis, go ahead. We work with 80 countries and 80 cultures and all kinds of languages. So go ahead. Go ahead. Try to do something. You can't. You're going to have to find a common point for all these people. So go to chapter 15. There are a lot of techniques, but just bear in mind that you're going to suffer and you're going to need to monitor the system all the time.
Excellent. So I think what next question should we go next? Well, multi-agents and LLM is the future. So,
well, multi-agents are already there. You already have swarms of agents on all social media. I remember Zuckerberg going to a Senate hearing, and the person says, "Tell me why this post got online." And Zuckerberg says, "Well, you know how many agents we have in there? How many AI agents? We're talking about hundreds of them. How do I know which one did that or everything?" They're already there. For large corporations or companies, you have multi-agents, of course, and they work on their own. Like in chapter 20, which is a chapter Bavish and I also discussed, you have agents that create their own prompts. So the chapter 15, I show automated ideation, where the system will just read what's going on in the company and then create the prompts by itself. And then you can have 10, 20, 100, 1,000 agents. I even showed in chapter 15 how ChatGPT can build another bot by itself. It wrote the code, and I just ran it for the fun of it.
Sure. Well, time for one more question.
You have an LLM system shall be able to reason.
Oh, so I went for Deepak's question. Unless you want to go.
Okay.
Which model, in your opinion, is
well,
easiest?
I would say go to Hugging Face.
Yeah.
Hugging Face is a fantastic place. These people, they don't have the deep pockets Google and OpenAI have, but they work hard. They've been there for years. They're doing their best. Hugging Face is an excellent place to go. Hugging Face, they have hundreds of models and a lot of free ones that you can download and work on. It's a very, very nice place. I'm just saying OpenAI because, I have to say something, but I use a Hugging Face a lot. And in the book, there are I use a lot of Hugging Face in the book. I mean, a lot of chapters are using Hugging Face. It's a great place. They have tutorials. They have nice documentation. They have articles. And what I like about Hugging Face is they speak about OpenAI, but they speak about everyone. So you have all kinds of, you can learn a lot. What they do is they always cite their sources. You're going to have a model card, and then you'll have the link to the paper so you can read the paper. Hugging Face, I mean, I use it a lot. In fact, I read their blog every day. I read the Hugging Face blog every day. In fact, I read all these blogs every day, but I read Hugging Face a lot because they're always trying to come up with something. They're a very dynamic team.
Are they easier? Are they as easy to use as OpenAI models?
It's extremely easy. If you go to Hugging Face, they already have models online. You can just test them right there. If you're thinking about Hugging Face, they have a framework. They created a fantastic framework where you can create like a source code with your tokenizer and your model, and you can just change the name of the tokenizer in the model and just run your code again. So that there's this framework where you can replace models with their tokenizers. Of course, you need the same tokenizer as the one used to train the model. And you can, it's very easy, and it's very documented, and it's very nice, and it's a nice place to go, of course.
Excellent. So I've got one final question. So any tips for working with large data sets or unstructured data?
So now we're getting to unstructured data, which is the data I find the most amusing. Because why do I find this amusing? You go to a company, and the company says, well, we have these databases, and we've been using them for years, so you can use them. But then you find that a lot of data is missing. Anyone here in this conversation that's worked with a company and trying to implement software finds that there was always something missing. There's always a field that's missing, a column that's missing, and then how are you going to get that data to run your large language model? Where are you going to get all that data? How are you going to label it? Suppose you have, I don't know. Let's suppose I download all the Amazon reviews I can on food. Okay, I did that in chapter 11. I went to Kaggle, and bam, I downloaded, I don't know how many reviews, a lot of them. How am I going to make sense of their emails and posts and all that? All that's unstructured. I don't even know what they're talking about. Talking about all kinds of food, tomatoes. I didn't even read them. So it's boring. I'm not going to spend my time labeling that stuff. So it's unstructured, right? I'm getting all that stuff. I know they're food reviews, but I don't know what they're talking about. And I don't care what they're talking about because a lot of that is very boring. I like that soda and I like that soda, but not, and another person says, well, I don't like that soda. Well, another person says, well, I like that soda, but not that flavor. If you begin to read that, you don't even want to. So we're dealing with unlabeled data, unstructured. It can be emails, it can be posts and text. So there's this fantastic tool which you can find on different websites to change a bit from OpenAI. Of course, there's an OpenAI model that does that, but you have like Pinecone, but be careful, you have to pay, that will embed the data. Okay, now what do I mean by that? If you go to chapter 11 of the book, you'll see that I was doing embedding on this data. I don't even know where it came from. I also did it for sports and all that. So what does embedding mean? Embedding means that I'm going to run a model that will embed, okay? And this model is going to create a vector, okay? It's going to create a vector, a set of numbers, okay? It's like a code. Let's say it creates a code, a large, like a GPS code, but instead of having just 2 latitude, longitude, it has 10,000 features, okay? So you have this big GPS code where it gives you a location of that thing somewhere in some kind of semantic space, and then you have another one. And once you've embedded this data, it's now you're not using the data anymore. You have the embeddings. That means you only have, instead of having London or Paris or New York or Tehran or any city in the world, you're going to have the GPS locations of them. But these are not GPS locations. These are conceptual locations with 10,000 features. But then you know which one is closer to the other one. So you don't need to look at the data anymore. So when there's an input by a user, the user has his input coming in like that. All of a sudden, you're going to try to find the data that's the closest. What is the closest location of data, embedded data I can find? I'm going to embed the input. So I'm not looking at the input anymore. I'm just looking at its embedding, and I'm comparing these GPS locations. Hey, well, that's the closest one. And then I'll pull it out, and I'll give you a review on this book or that food or that sports activity. So embedding data with, we call them vector databases, because, of course, these numbers constitute a vector. Well, then you have all these a vector database. It's fantastic because you just work on them. You don't know what's inside of them. And since the AIs don't know what's inside of them either, no one's worried about it in any case. So I'll give you the ones that are closer to each other, and the user will then make sense of it. So remember that. You're the one making sense of what's going on. The engine doesn't know, the model doesn't know, and the vector databases don't know either. They're just doing a lot of math, and you're making sense of it. But it's a good way, and you can do with images too. You can do images with embedding too, because you convert you'll see that in chapters 16 to 20, where we convert images into sequences of vectors, exactly like we did with words, and you can compare the images, and that's how we recognize images, in fact. Okay. So that's one way to deal with it.
Just conscious of time, we've got a couple of questions. It's whether we can answer them offline. And I'm just thinking if we do the final
giveaway.
If
there are questions, of course, I'll go back to that in the days to come. I'll go back to this, just telling everyone I'm going to go back to this live session, and I'll go minute by minute through all the comments, and I'll answer every single comment that I haven't answered in this conversation. Fortunately, I have a pretty good memory, so I know which ones I answered and which ones I didn't. So I'll answer all the questions I didn't answer. Hopefully, and if I forget any of these questions, you can contact me on LinkedIn in the message environment. I always answer all questions. I answer any question someone asks, either in the as comments in my posts or in the message area, and I answer all these questions free. I never ask for a cent, of course. It's free. It's just sharing knowledge, so don't worry about that. So if I forget to answer one of these questions, go and ask them in the message area in LinkedIn. That's where I go there every day, and I answer all questions for free, of course.
So we'll do the final draw. So don't worry if you don't win the book. There is 20% discount on our Packt website, and I'll share that link after the event as well. So you can get 20% off until the 24th of March. But
Stefan Shimshok asked a good question.
do you want to answer that before we finish?
Yeah, let's answer that question before we leave.
So, yeah, do you believe LLMs can evolve autonomously to the point where the mechanism becomes incomprehensible to us humans?
I find that very scary, and I find it very true. I think we're almost there already. In fact, in chapter 7, I start the chapter by saying superhuman AI. It's become incredibly complex and incredibly powerful. When you take even when you take Llama 2 on Hugging Face, you wonder how it can answer so many questions. If you take any of these models, you go to Gemini, you go to even T5 Google, you go to any of these models, even the BERT models, the mechanisms are becoming so powerful that they're exceeding the human capacity to absorb so many parameters. Like when I was speaking about these unstructured data, we're talking about 12,228 dimensions. And we're having problems with 2 dimensions, X and Y. And then when we reach Z, X, Y, Z in a 3-dimensional space, wow. Now 4, wow, we're reaching 5, 15. Now we're in a Hilbert space, which is unlimited. We're lost. So yes, I think with all this training, we're almost there already. Where I attempt to explain things. I think it's around chapter 9 somewhere in the book, where I go inside and I try to explain how it works inside. Even in chapter 3, I go into the weights and all that. You can do it. You can understand what it's doing, but what is it really doing? I mean, how can we know what 175 billion parameters are doing, or 500 billion? So, Stephen, yeah, there needs to be some control there, or scary. Yeah, scary but useful.
Scary, yeah. So.
Well, it can be scary to drive in traffic in a big city, you know.
Just go for the final giveaway. So let's see who wins the second ebook. Bedcash. Yes, so congratulations. And if you can just, again, message me on LinkedIn with your email address, and we'll get the book to you as soon as possible.
And I'll answer all the questions you want in the message part of my profile or in comments, no problem.
So I think thanks, Denis, for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. And yeah, have a good day. Thanks
everyone. Have a nice day or evening or night.